It is indeed. Thank you so much for having me. I'm hugely enjoying this because actually my hood in London was always in the West, and once you have your hood in London, you never really change. My grandmother was born in Königsberg, and short stories I've got the highest respect for. So I'm very, very pleased to be here. Thank you so much. So I'm going to talk to you about my debut, Tsarina. I have to show you the cover because it's so beautiful. Teal reflects the Nevas waves, and here we have the imperial crimson of the fur. Tsarina is not about Catherine the Great, but about Catherine I of Russia, and it is the first and only novel about this illiterate serf girl who rose to be the first woman ever reigning the world's largest and wealthiest realm in its time. Russia itself changed from a backward nation to the beginnings of a superpower, and I'm going to read you the first pages of Tsarina. In the Winter Palace, 1725. He's dead. My beloved husband, the mighty Tsar of all the Russias, has died, and just in time. Moments before death came for him, Peter called for a quill and paper to be brought in his bedchamber in the Winter Palace. My heart almost stalled. He had not forgotten, but was going to drag me down with him. When he lost consciousness for the last time, and the darkness drew him closer to its heart, the quill slipped from his fingers. Black ink spattered the soiled sheets. Time held its breath. What had the Tsar wanted to settle with the last effort of his tremendous spirit? I knew the answer. The candles in the tall candelabras filled the room with a heavy scent and an unsteady light. Their glow made shadows reel in corners and brought the woven figurines on the Flemish tapestries to life, their coarse faces showing pain and disbelief. Outside the door, the voices of the people who'd stood there all night were drowned out by the February wind rattling furiously at the shutters. Time spread slowly, like oil on water. Peter had pressed himself into our souls like his signet ring in hot wax. It seemed impossible that the world hadn't careened to a halt at his passing. My husband, the greatest will ever to impose itself on Russia, had never been more than our ruler. He had been our fate. He was still mine. The doctors Blumentrost, Paulsen and Horn stood silently around Peter's bed, browbeaten. 5 kopecks worth of medicine could have saved him. Thank God for the quack's lack of good sense. Without looking, I could feel Feofan Prokopovich, the Archbishop of Novgorod, watching me, alongside with Alexander Menshikov. Prokopovich had made the Tsar's will eternal, and Peter had much to thank him for. Menshikov, on the other hand, owed his fortune and influence to Peter. What was it Peter had said when someone tried to blacken Alexander Danilovich's name to him by referring to his murky business dealings? Menshikov is always Menshikov in all that he does. That had put an end to that. Dr. Paulsen had closed the Tsar's eyes and crossed his hands on his breast, but he hadn't removed the scroll, Peter's last will and testament, from his grasp. Those hands, which were always too dainty for the tall, powerful body, had grown still, helpless. Just 2 weeks earlier, he had plunged them into my hair, winding it round his fingers, inhaling the scent of rosewater and sandalwood. "My Catherine," he'd said, calling me by the name he himself had given me, and he had smiled at me. "You're still a beauty. But what will you look like in a convent, shorn and bald? The cold there will break you, your spirit, even though you're strong as a horse. Do you know that Evdokia still writes to me, begging for a second fur, poor thing? What a good job you can't write," he'd said, laughing. It had been 30 years since Evdokia had been banished to the convent. I'd met her once. Her eyes shone with madness. Her shaven head was covered in boils and scabs from the cold and the filth, and her only company was a hunchbacked dwarf to serve her in her cell. Peter had ordered the poor creature have her tongue cut out. So in response to Evdokia's moaning and laments, all she was able to do was babble. He'd been right to believe that seeing Evdokia would fill me with lifelong dread. I knelt at Peter's bedside, and the three doctors retreated to the twilight at the edge of the room, like crows driven from a field, the birds Peter had been so terrified of in the last years of his life. The Tsar had called open season on the hapless birds all over his empire. Farmers caught, killed, plucked, and roasted them for reward. None of this helped Peter. Silently, at night, the bird would slip through the padded walls and locked doors of his bedchamber. Its ebony wings blotted the light, and in their cool shadow, the blood on the Tsar's hands never dried. His fingers were not yet those of a corpse, but soft and still warm for a moment. The fear and anger of those past few months slipped from my heart like a thief in the night. I kissed his hands and breathed in his familiar scent of Tabasco, ink, leather, and a perfume tincture that was blended for his sole use in Grasse. I took the scroll from his hand. It was easy enough to slide it out. Also my blood thickened with fear, and my veins were coated with frost and rime like branches in our Baltic winter. It was important to show everyone that I alone was entitled to do this. I, his wife, and the mother of his children. 12 times I had given birth. Thank you very much.